Hello, this is Dale Matthews, and I'm joined by Mike Jones.
And what is legal, Dale? Is it legal to ram a cop car?
No, this week only. It is not legal to do so. We experience computer crashes from time to time, but it usually doesn't end up anything like this. This is not the fault of the internet.
I know what that's about. That's because marijuana's legal now,
That's not why
right?
that happened. No, I'll tell you what
Yes,
happened.
people have gone crazy.
They're more likely to get mellow and then not want to work. No, we can't have them not want to work. You got to stop this thing.
They
Okay,
want to
so
bang on the drum all day.
yeah, so there's a guy that the police are looking for. He ran into it was near Walmart, and he ran into some other vehicle and took off. And we have his picture for you. It's over my shoulder. This part's true. What do you mean this part's true? Yes, yes, this part is
Yes.
true. And here we go. This is the guy that they're looking for. Okay, they're
Yes.
looking for this guy. Now, I
He's
want you to
he's
go
wearing a
ahead.
Batman shirt.
He is wearing a Batman shirt. Good for you, Mike. And for those who
Yes.
can't quite figure out that this is Batman, what I've done is I've had our ACE group of intellectual property gurus and also fantastic artists come up with this just so that you can tell. See, that's what the police are looking for. Batman. Right, right.
Yes,
That's
thank you.
that's
I would
yes.
not have known if it weren't for the mask
He
there.
looked a
Thank
lot like Bruce Wayne until he put on the mask, and now he doesn't
Yes.
look anything like Bruce Wayne.
You know,
Yeah,
if you're trying not to be recognized, you're probably better off not wearing one of the most recognizable symbols on the face of the planet. Uh, you know, I mean, don't wear a shirt that says Coca-Cola. Wear a shirt that says Bill's Cola or something like that. Then no one will
right.
know what it is.
Now, just for those of you who kind of delight in the fact that we point fingers at local media, who else does, here's how Channel 12 handled this situation. Channel 12's version.
Yeah, you almost can't tell that's a Batman
You
shirt.
can't. So see what they were trying to do is they were trying to be artsy. No, I won't use that word. They're trying to be
Yes.
artsy, and they wanted to tilt it a little bit, you see.
Yes.
And
Uh-huh.
so because the picture wasn't high enough, they decided to stretch out the bottom of it, and now it doesn't look like a Batman shirt at all. And now we
Okay.
can't find the guy because we're looking for the wrong thing. We're looking for, like a OIT symbol or something.
Well, yeah, but let me ask you, from when is this picture? Did he stand there in front of a Walmart security camera and go, "Hey, it's me. Take a look at me. Get my
When
mugshot
was the
over."
last time you wore a Batman shirt? He
Uh,
obviously took this when he was
in
12.
1992 or three, maybe.
Yeah, this is a picture when he was 12, and
Yes.
maybe the guy is 12. Okay, but anyway, this is how Newswatch 12 handled this. You see, because art had to sacrifice for art didn't make this whatever, you know what I mean. So anyway,
Art's a
yeah.
good guy. Quit giving him a bad time.
Art Harvey, I don't
Yeah.
agree. He needs to be replaced. Anyway, they're looking for not this. They're looking for this.
Yeah.
Okay, but as long as we were back there, we're going to talk to the chief of police in a moment. We're going to talk about legal marijuana, but it almost seems that way when you read this headline. That's from it. Now, this was. Showed up here locally, and so I actually went back to the Press Enterprise of Riverside, California. Now, what does this say? Shooting kills father, okay, of ice cave collapse orphans. What? What?
Yes.
Shooting kills father, yeah, of ice cave collapse orphans. What the heck?
Well, apparently an ice cave collapsed somewhere and
Yes,
created
and
some
somebody was
orphans.
killed.
But wait a minute. But wait a minute. Did the ice cave collapse create the orphans, or did the father being shot create the orphans? And
Good
then
point,
which
Mike.
came first? Which came first, the chicken or the egg here?
Well, Mike's had a couple of days to think about it, but I'm looking at this saying Shooting kills father of ice cave collapse orphans. Shooting kills father of ice cave collapse orphans. What? Who wrote this headline? Okay, I think what it means is there was an ice cave collapse, and it has a picture of a woman, a fairly attractive young lady. Why is she in this
Yes.
story? Right?
Well, hey, now wait a minute.
You
It
always
could
like pictures of attractive young women,
That
no
could
matter
be
what the story.
could be Caitlyn Jenner there, and she is somebody's father. Don't you know that?
Okay, all right. So
Dale, this is the world we're living in now.
I just have to say it again.
You better get used to it.
Shooting kills father of ice cave collapse orphans. Okay,
and there he is. And there he is.
Okay, so apparently what happened is this nice young lady, she never married the guy. It doesn't matter anymore. And she went with some other guy into an ice cave, and it collapsed, and it killed her and the guy and her brother. Okay, so the kids weren't quite orphans, not quite yet. Okay, then several days later, the father of the kids. That's why they can't say husband, right? So the father of the kids gets involved in a brawl in a bar. How dare you say my wife is like that cube of ice, or whatever in the bar. And so he gets killed.
Wow.
So shooting kills father.
That's amazing.
It's not a funny story, but shooting kills father of ice cave collapse orphans. Couldn't you make the words just a little smaller and add in a couple more?
I hate to say this, but this may well have been a Darwinian refining
brother.
of the gene pool.
That's terrible, Mike. Terrible.
Well, I'm sorry. If you're crawling into an ice cave that's prone to collapsing, and then you're going to bars where you may likely be shot, then these are things which could narrow the breeding.
Narrow the breeding. There won't be any breeding.
You know what I'm talking about.
They're both dead.
The gene pool.
Oh, jeez.
Yes,
okay.
Right, exactly. This is kind of what I was getting at.
So,
and we're probably better off for it. Thank you.
Probably better off. Okay, so that's the news part of the show. Was that the comedy part, Marge? No, that was the news part. Okay, so we sat down yesterday with the chief of police of Grants Pass. Don't say he's the chief of the city police because there's another city and blah, blah, and they're going to get all over us. Okay. And we talked about a number of issues in a room that was very dark. Okay. So that way the bruises on both of us don't show up. And also it had this odd ringing noise. Was he wringing his hands? I don't think so. But anyway, so we got a chance to talk to him and just now uploaded it so that we can talk to you about it. So Mike and I, a little tech talk here, Mike, just stop at any time you like, anytime that you like, and we will talk about it. And then everyone will be able to keep up. This part of the conversation was about marijuana and about the city council and about how are you going to enforce these laws and what does it really mean? Go ahead and start that off there, Mike.
Chief Landis, so you pull somebody over because they didn't signal their intention on the road, and when you go up to the window, you notice there's a open container of alcohol. That person's in trouble. But what if there was a half-smoked marijuana joint? Is that person in trouble?
So there's actually a law that pertains to operation of motor vehicle with an open container. So under a state statute, we would cite you for that violation. What changed on July 1st as far as marijuana goes is you're actually allowed now to possess outside of your home up to an ounce of marijuana. So if there was a half-smoked joint in the ashtray, as long as you're not impaired driving down the road with that, there's absolutely no offense now that applies to that less than ounce of or up to an ounce of marijuana that's inside the vehicle.
Or if it's not a really big joint.
Right, but why is there a difference?
Yes, right, yes.
Why is there a difference between a half-consumed bottle of scotch and a half-consumed marijuana joint? Why is there any difference?
And you raise a great question, and sometimes the laws don't catch up. So because we've just come online with July 1st with this new law as far as recreational marijuana, My guess is, as I've watched the law in the last 25 years, you're going to start to see things evolve too as we start to learn and the state legislature starts to learn and decides to make decisions. Organizations like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers has drastically changed how we interpret alcohol over the years. And some of those laws, I would say, and some of the enhancements have come as a result of their efforts, seeing the seriousness of drinking and driving, especially with youth. When I first started 25 years ago, if we came upon a party of kids who were consuming alcohol and stuff, we would have them dump out the alcohol. We were busy sometimes, and so no big deal. When we got better educated and when Mothers Against Drunk Drivers got to get people on board to see the seriousness of what was happening, we don't do that anymore. Zero tolerance for many years now as far as kids drinking and that kind of thing. And I would use that analogy to say, I would say that with marijuana, if things start to not be successful the way it's originally implemented, you'll start to see tougher laws or things requiring, much like you just said with the open container in a motor vehicle.
There's the Boatnik Parade every year, and you can occasionally see as the floats go by that there are people on the side that are maybe drinking a little beer and having a good time. There's no one running over and arresting them while they're doing that. Even though there's a rule against consuming alcoholic beverages in public. Is the same thing going to happen with the smoking of marijuana along the parade route?
No, the one thing you have to remember is we're not turning a blind eye to things. The parade and what goes on at the parade and stuff, anytime we would see something that we needed to take action, we would. We have to look at the totality of the circumstances. Officer chasing a float down the path may not be so wise, but we certainly even use parade officials to help us with rules and regulations so that participants in the parade adhere to safety. And over the years, we've had people get on it with their race cars and stuff. And you've got 10,000 people lining the parade route in estimation, and not a safe thing to have something happen. And alcohol is not always a good mix for large crowds and things happening. So we're not turning a blind eye. And I would say this, that if somebody's smoking marijuana in public, which is a violation of the way the law is intended, it definitely infringes upon other people's rights because of the odor and smell. Some people take offense to it, and we would not be turning a blind eye to that either. So it's not either or. We treat one differently. We take action anytime we feel like we see something and it needs to be dealt with.
It's interesting about this thing about odor, because if I suddenly felt that I liked the smell of a smudge pot, can I carry that around town?
Yes, interesting. And your angle on this, does this have anything to do with the recently passed outdoor grow ban? Are you going to be the enforcement entity? I guess you would have to be because it's in the city. Are you going to be going around enforcing, the grow ban? And what will you do if you find an outdoor grow that's in violation of the ordinance?
So city's code enforcement falls under public safety. It didn't always, but many years ago it transferred over to here. So we have code enforcement officers or community service officers who actually enforce city code. And a lot of that is complaint driven. So neighbor to neighbor picks up the phone and says, hey, there's been a trailer parked on my street for a week, and can you do something about it? There's a vehicle that's been here for 2 weeks, and 72 hours is a length of stay for not an abandoned auto statute. And so is there something you can do about that? Marijuana will be no different. A lot of times, because the marijuana is grown out of sight, which is also what the law required where it is legal to grow outdoors, it's supposed to be out of sight, that if a neighbor calls and says, hey, there's marijuana plants growing, then like any code violation, we would go and investigate and deal with it. Most of our code enforcement, because of the totality of codes and because of the number of citizens, is more complaint driven than it is proactive. So you won't see public safety peering over fences to try to count and see whether there's plants or no plants. But if someone files a complaint, we would certainly be investigating the complaint like anything else. And I say that because council may change their plan. Currently, they're evaluating whether they want to go to a more proactive code enforcement program as opposed to more complaint-driven. Some communities like the complaint-driven because it's neighbor to neighbor getting along with your neighbor versus big brother, coming in and telling you what you should or shouldn't do.
I have a quick question for you, Dale. Maybe you can clear this up for me, because does this outdoor ban, does this apply to all growing of marijuana? Because now, personally, you're allowed to grow 4 plants, as I've seen it. So if I'm growing 4 plants, does this ordinance apply to commercial grows only? Or if I just have a couple of plants in my backyard, does that then apply to me too? Do you know?
My understanding is it applies to everything. And so it's actually making it harder for people who want to grow marijuana, even if it's not the non-smelly kind. Now, everybody's going to have to grow it in their house, not even in their garage, in their house. Well, I don't know garage. I'm not sure. I think not. I think it does. That garages will not be okay because they're not sealed in the same way that a house is. We're going to get into that in a minute. Just a couple more things. What we know from what he's saying is nobody knows what the actual law is going to be. He even said there, well, we're going to enforce this. We're going to enforce it depending on the circumstances. Well, see, I hate those kinds of laws.
Yeah, wow.
You know, you never really know. I mean, maybe never in our town, but if you don't like somebody, then you're going to enforce the law. And if wait a minute, what is
it's very subjective.
There's no rule. There's not really a rule. They're going to do it when they want to. As the previous mayor of Cave Junction said to me, well, we're not going to enforce that law about drinking beer along the sides of the roads because they might be Rotary Club members. He really did say that.
Oh, wow.
Now, that just shows where his head was at. It's got nothing to do with Rotary, but I mean, really, that's what he had in mind.
On a technical question here, I wonder if this would make a difference if we mic'd him up next time, as opposed to, because you weren't kidding. I mean, it sounds like there's some sort of a HVAC fan or something like that going in the background the whole time.
Yeah, it does, and I didn't even notice that at the time.
Yeah,
now,
I didn't either.
People at home are going to say, "What? I don't hear anything," because you get used to it after a little bit. It's just if we put this, you don't care, but if we put this next to each other, to the sheriff's interviews, that sounds dead silent compared with this.
Oh, yeah, and the lighting in his office is fantastic.
Oh, this whole thing about the lighting and all. I mean, it just looks like we're meeting in the dark.
I'm thinking maybe we should bring a clip-on light to clip it on the edge of the desk to light up the right side of his face there.
Oh, and then it's going to show from underneath, and that always looks like it's Halloween or something. Well, but the sheriff's shirt, the sheriff's pumpkin-colored shirt, yeah, Halloween. He says he was wearing it because of OSU. Yeah, I think he just likes pumpkins. One other thing along the kind of notes that we do when we do this show, it's our show. Listen, just relax. When he said that you have to grow your marijuana out of sight, can't you just see it? The policeman coming, hey, this marijuana is supposed to be out of sight. Hey, man, it is. It's out of sight.
Yes, that's right. You haven't tried this stuff, man. It is really out of sight.
Oh, and did anybody happen to notice, by the way, that when Mike made his subtle reference to Cheech and Chong, the city police chief, he knew exactly. He knew the line from the movie. Oh, really? Just how do you know that? Yes. Extensive research. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Well, let him continue.
Is there a
distinction
between outdoor and, say, in a greenhouse?
So currently outdoor, they've made no exceptions for greenhouses. So per the code, outdoor means outdoor. And so if it's being grown in a greenhouse, council didn't make an exception. They certainly considered it at one point to say that. But greenhouses sometimes don't really protect all of the odors. There's some standards as far as building code that might have to be looked at. And so I think they just left that alone.
So does that mean it is illegal to grow in the greenhouse?
Currently.
Okay.
Really?
So when I say greenhouse, that's a broad interpretation. So
okay,
a plastic wrapped building would be a greenhouse. And
let's say you went to the building department, you got a building permit, and you built a greenhouse, an approved structure that meets building codes and things of that nature. Would that then still be an outdoor grow?
My understanding currently is yes, that would still be considered. And council did evaluate the possibility of granting an exception to outdoor grows to include greenhouses.
Well, let me ask that in another way. Now, my interpretation of a greenhouse is you've got probably glass walls, you've got a glass or plastic roof. That seems to me to be indoors as opposed to something that's exposed to the sun and the wind and the rain. So why, just because your house that you're growing things in, I mean, it still has a roof and walls, why, just because the walls are transparent, why is that not indoors?
Because a greenhouse really typically, and again, we're getting into a broad category, isn't sealed like a house or an indoor structure would be per code. So you're not really protecting from the reasons why council is considering, in my opinion, the outdoor grow issue as I heard it. Still not protected from theft issues, still doesn't really encompass the odor issue. And so for all the reasons they were concerned about the outdoor grows, a greenhouse doesn't give you more of that. Maybe it's a little less of the smell, but it's not something that's a tight sealed structure like something that's built to code, like a building, a house, garage, something like that.
Interesting.
So you do have discretion, some discretion. Let's suppose that a police officer goes to some place and he can see there are marijuana plants growing in a greenhouse or just outside of a greenhouse. And for some reason, there's absolutely no odor at all. Well, now what happens?
So the code doesn't ask us to measure the odor.
You can't. How could
The
you?
code says
No
outdoor grows. So we won't get into the, and it's a slippery slope deal. Once you start to say, well, this one really doesn't smell that bad, so I'm going to make an exception here, we start getting into a real objective area that's not necessarily something that, I think we want to get into. So if we're called and somebody's complaining and we go investigate and it meets the outdoor criteria, then basically it is in violation.
Let me put it another way. Let's suppose that somebody has a house and they're growing indoors and they've got two windows open and the wind is blowing right through the house into their neighbor's open window. Well, that could be pretty smelly. It could be.
Yeah. Yeah, what do you do in that case if the neighbor is complaining of the smell and yet you're technically meeting the requirements of the ordinance? What do you do in that case?
That's a tough one where actually, like we do anytime where we feel like we're not clear on the ordinance and whether or not it clearly is a violation, we would consult with the city attorney to, I have that at times with noise ordinances. Someone feels like the noise is infringing on them, and so we look at the decibel levels and we look at the use and the zoning and all the different things, and we get the city attorney. And a lot of times we try to get people to figure out how we might mitigate the circumstance. It's possible that the code then could be expanded. The city's also looking at its nuisance code right now and stuff, and some of those have to do with trash and smells and things like that do infringe on neighbors and neighbors' rights and stuff. So I could see that maybe actually be included, for that purpose. The idea is that we figure out how to live amongst ourselves without infringing on each other's rights or abilities. And if the odor and the smell starts to do that, it's exactly why the council, I think, felt like they needed to ban the outdoor grows, especially in those residential areas where people are trying to get along. It's the music issue. We get if we don't get there to tell somebody to turn on the music, you got two people out fist fighting and stuff. And people get agitated enough over time because the livability becomes so stressful. So that's kind of how we make everybody play nice in the sandbox and get along without having those kind of issues.
Barking dog.
Barking dog, that's an excellent one, yes.
So in the area of measurement, we all know some people just can't seem to walk a straight line even when they're straight. And so then the question is, while you can give somebody a breathalyzer test, what kind of test are you going to give them for marijuana intoxication?
So we have already been doing that for years. I mean, that's nothing new. Impairment is impairment, even when you're talking about different substances on board.
So you're talking the roadside test.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying about the roadside test. Some people can't pass that when they haven't been taking anything.
So the roadside test is not the only determinant as far as somebody being impaired. It's the discussion, it's the questions that we ask, it's the orientation or disorientation, it's the vehicle in motion leading up to, why we stopped here, what's going on. All of those factors contribute to making a determination of whether you're impaired to the level that's noticeable or perceptible that constitutes a violation.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Dale, but I'm assuming that what you're getting at is we have a breath and a blood test for alcohol. What do you got for marijuana?
So we do offer a urinalysis, and so they do screen urinalysis and stuff and look at basically a concentration that would equate to whether the person is impaired. And under implied consent, a person has the right to refuse that. And under implied consent, that can be used against you in a court of law as a consideration, and also means that under Oregon, where they gave you your driver's license, you can be suspended for that, just like refusing a breath test.
Well, there are certainly cases where the police will take someone to a hospital and forcibly draw their blood to test it for what circumstances have to occur in order for that to take place.
So basically, you're incapacitated to basically go to the jail and take the breath test. So usually where we see things like that are in crashes. Someone is injured, taken to the hospital. You're certainly not going to get them down to the jail for a breath test and stuff. So what we do is we use that for the blood draw.
So there's no danger of running up against the Fifth Amendment?
Well, it's been tested, and I will tell you this: as far as criminal law goes, probably DUIs are probably one of the most constitutionally challenged things, because it knows no specific demographic, and it reaches all levels, and people who have money that can afford attorneys to fight certainly do. And so, in my 25 years, I've watched challenges to field sobriety testing and different things go through and it get refined, but there isn't something constitutionally when the same standard would apply, where I say I believe I have probable cause based on a gamut of circumstances to believe that the person to be impaired. And so for that, then that allows me under exigent circumstances to draw the blood. If I was to go get a warrant, time being something, alcohol starts to dissipate and stuff. And so my evidence is actually leaving the body, and I have to be able to make that determination.
But if they're really hammered or something, you probably have time to get a warrant and
Depending on what day of the week and time it is?
No. So,
I mean, wouldn't it be harder if it was midnight on a Friday night?
Yeah,
and
you're
you're
not
facing
gonna
a
get a
weekend. That's what I
judge
meant about
to-
day of.
well, you're still drafting the warrant, which takes time, and you're still getting a DA to give the blessing, and then basically to get a judge to get it signed. And if the judge is,
Hey, what about separation of church and state?
Yeah, he just did it. We saw the DA doing some Catholic thing here.
and if the judge is basically in court or in trial or who knows and stuff. So there is a time, and in some ways, the world according to me, but you're also protecting that person's rights, because if there's any dispute about what it was or what they had on board about that time, time is an argument. And so we want to make sure that the observations and the relative time to where the crash occurred has some accurate delineation of what they have going on at the time of that crash. And if I was to get a warrant, let's say 2 hours wasn't that unreasonable, alcohol dissipates at a 0.015%, I think, per hour. So the problem is you're not being accurate as to what truly was going on at that time. And I think that's why the courts have upheld the exception rule based on the crash circumstances of the injured person at the hospital. There was a time where there was a blood draw at the hospital like anybody, who basically comes in injured and a blood is drawn like they would check for medical and whatever, and officers weren't entitled to know, what the ETOH is or the alcohol content of that, and that's changed where that can be shared with the officer and stuff. So again, probably the most legally challenged crime that I can think of. Search and seizure is a constitutional challenge that we have a lot of, but I'm just saying as far as a crime per se by itself, it's probably one of the most legally challenged issues as far as process and tests and circumstances that led up to the determination.
Well, okay, so we talked a little bit there about the Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment. The fourth is the protection against unreasonable search and seizure, and the Fifth Amendment is the protection against self-incrimination. And under the implied consent law, since driving is not considered to be a right in most states, it's a privilege. The police, it's stood the test of time, and many courts have said, because you're driving around, you've given us implied consent to do a blood test.
Right.
Really? Whether you like it or not.
Well, you're exercising your privileges, and one of the conditions of that privilege is their ability to check you for impairment.
To take your blood from you against your wishes? Makes me feel uncomfortable, but I don't have a phobia about needles, but still, really.
I think that's why the blood is one of the last things that, they would rather have, breath or urine, as a first resort. as opposed to going to the blood thing, because that's, it's a bigger deal.
It's going to be a lot harder with marijuana laws, because you're really going to need to do some kind of urine test. What, on the side of the road? I mean, you can't
Yes,
just.
that's it.
Wow.
And ma'am, could
Oh,
you
right,
step
yes.
over? I
Yeah.
mean, for a guy, it's not that big a deal. And he's
Well, speak for yourself. It's a big deal with me, but some guy.
Okay. But
measure
what I'm
inches.
saying is, it's much more easily accomplished with a guy. A guy could
It
go,
is.
well, yeah, I could give you some right now. Why don't you, give me a, couple glasses of water, and I'll produce something for you here in 5 minutes.
Or better than that, more beer.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And I mean, a woman's going to have, she could do the same thing, but accommodating her is going to be a little bit different.
That's right.
I would think that's probably going to have to be done at the jail. They're not going to be doing that out on the side of the road.
Look, the reason we're doing this show is not because we're in love with marijuana and all the rest of that. It's all of the other things that go along with it.
Yeah, but this is legal now, and people ought to know what applies to it and what doesn't. I think, for one, this open container half smoked joint thing, I think that's going to have some, that's going to do some transformation. I would imagine
one of them gets me too is the thing about even if you have your marijuana in a greenhouse, that's considered to be outdoors.
Yeah.
It just goes back to that whole thing and the mayor of Grants Pass, where you can take advantage of God's light that's shining down on you and you pay nothing for it, right? As opposed to going to the mayor of Grants Pass, Darren Fowler, for example, who makes some of his money from installing indoor grow situation. Well, so shouldn't he recuse himself from every vote that would force people to grow indoors?
Yeah, one would think so. Although, this ban passed unanimously. He didn't have to chime in on it at all in order for this ban to pass. So that's, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of outdoor pot being grown in Grants Pass anyway, because, you're going to have maybe 2-3 neighbors living next to one another that all have been smoking up to now anyway. And, they're growing a few plants in the backyard. They don't care if their neighbor does it, and there's certainly going to be very large weed plants growing without smell, because I've seen that before myself. I've seen very large. I used to work on electrical on billboards, and I'd get up on billboards. You'd see all kinds of stuff, and I've seen a couple of marijuana grows right there. Huge plants, didn't smell a thing.
Well, but I think the bottom line about a lot of this is the purpose behind now categorizing this as an agricultural crop, which it is in Oregon. Part of the purpose was to bring all of this black market activity out from behind the shadows, come out of the closet, Bruce Jenner, and come out and do things in public without getting prosecuted and without spending all that money to round up all the usual suspects and take them off to jail because they've been smoking this funny cigarettes. Okay, right. So now when you've got a rule about, well, that smell, well, it doesn't actually smell. Well, even if it doesn't smell, if there's no smell at all and it's in a greenhouse, then what is your problem? Now, that, just as Mike just said, now those people are going to continue to do stuff which is against the law, because they have been doing it. Their chance to come out from the closet is now thrown away, because they're going to say, look, this isn't bothering anybody.
Right. And what's going to happen with people who are growing a few plants out in the county? Because if you can grow 4 plants, there's going to be a lot of houses that have 4 plants growing outside in a county. And so what happens if people start complaining, or perhaps after a couple of years, there is no complaining of these grows out in the county, even with houses that are right next door to each other? What happens then with the city ban? Does that remain in place, or do they consider?
there's the whole thing about you live near the airport and you complain about the noise of airplanes. Well, what did you expect? You live near an airport. You live in Sunny Valley, and now you're going to complain about the sound of gravel trucks going
Right.
down your street. Okay, all right, because we can't stand that. Okay, I'm not unsympathetic to everybody, but I like the smell of a good cigar. I don't want to smoke any of it, but I think a good cigar to me smells good. Okay, yeah, just
So
relax.
what you're saying is, as long as someone's growing some high grade marijuana, hey,
Well, it does sort of remind me of college where I wasn't smoking there either. But I mean, it does remind me of concerts that I went to and stuff like that. And it wasn't all the Doobie Brothers. Relax. But the point is that that we're really now getting to the point where out in the county, if you live next to somebody's cattle farm, well, as they say, that's the smell of money. Well, doesn't smell
yes,
much like money to me, but there's
wow,
smells everywhere. And I said to him, well, what if I suddenly decide I like the smell of a smudge pot and I can walk around all around town carrying a smudge pot, that thing that they keep orchards warm, and
right.
it's burning tar, isn't it?
I think they burn like diesel.
Well, it's more tar and nicotine than you find in a cigarette. Anyway, so if I decide I want to walk
Okay.
all over town with that, why, oh, I object. Really? Well, what about the smell of your diesel engine, or the smell of this, or the smell of that, or the smell of you? Or
Listen. I think we both understand that the reasoning behind this outdoor grow ban initially has very little to do with um, concerns about the smell.
that's
What it
right.
really has to do with is the city of Grants Pass still wanting to have some power over this thing.
Yeah. And there's the real question: how long is this power going to last in the hands of these city councilors? At what point will the people, unlikely, the newspaper, impossible, the governor, maybe, or the federal government step in and say, you can't do that, or you're not doing enough, or whatever?
Yeah, or you know, how are they? What is the point of all this anyway?
Mm.
I mean, at some point, you know, things are going to find their level here, and I would assume that maybe they may be setting up some sort of a fee or a tax or a something to get a special permit to do it. Maybe that's the angle here. I don't know, but
They're sure not embracing it as an economic opportunity. If it's true, that this is now an agricultural crop, why aren't you welcoming it? Well, because I don't like the morality of it. You don't like the morality of an agricultural crop. If people were growing tobacco, would you be throwing obstacles in their way? It's legal. I don't like it. I don't want to smoke it myself. And it gets you
well, there's
addicted.
there's wineries everywhere, and there's distilleries everywhere. There's all kinds of that kind of stuff. I mean, where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't like
You
the
know what?
smell of this winery. I don't like the smell of this gas station. I don't like the smell of this city council. Really?
Yes, I think that I, as a human being, have the wisdom, hopefully, to make proper decisions for myself. And if I don't want to buy that, and by the way, it's been available to anybody who wanted it for many, many years. You just had to go through some sneaky routes to get it, as opposed to walking into a store. So it's not like we haven't had that choice. I trust myself with that choice, and I choose not to partake of marijuana. It's not my thing. uh I need all the brain cells that I have left.
With that said, before I run out, I think we're going to say good night. Good night, everybody.